nature, sustainability. These two are the buzzwords of the decade and what we've been hearing for the past decade with almost every manufacturer that designs EVs, builds EVs. Generally what they tend to do is they take an ICE vehicle, they plop out the engine, they put in the motor, they put in the battery pack, and you have an EV. But these two manufacturers took a slightly different approach by building dedicated skateboard architecture for their vehicles. Now, even though Kia and Hyundai share a lot of the underpinnings and parts, they decided to take two completely different approaches with building their own EV. And as the looks can convey, one is a bit more conservative while the other is a bit more flamboyant. So, which one is the better one and which one is the better pick for you? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you. To start with, let's talk about the exterior design of both these cars. Now let's begin with the Hyundai Ioniq. Now the Hyundai Ioniq has a more muscular, angular sort of design, you know. It's very boxy, it's very retro, it's very 70s, yet it's modern. It looks like something that the next Back to the Future would be built on. I mean, look at it. The headlamp, again, beautiful smoked headlamp design over here. You get two vents in the front, at the bottom over here that open whenever the car is hot or when it's charging. Now you get this giant Hyundai logo, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I wish this was blacked out. It would actually look a lot cooler. Now, on the Ioniq, you get a set of 20-inch wheels, which in my opinion is a bit overkill. 20-inch wheels in our country, but despite that, we'll get to the ride quality a bit later, but 20-inch wheels, and I really like the wheel design. In fact, I think I like the wheel design on the Ioniq slightly more than I do on the Kia EV6. Now, if you come to the side over here, the angular lines don't stop. It's everywhere. One thing that does bother me is the little panel gaps that you see over here. Now, this is something that you will get used to, but initially when I first saw it, it did look a bit uneven to me. But it's something that your eyes just get used to in time. You get flush door handles in here. You walk along the side and you can see that the lines are a lot better tapered over here. Every line seems to connect to another and has some form of purpose. The Ioniq is slightly taller in terms of height too, so it just looks visually a bit more present over there in that sense, whereas the EV6 is slightly longer, which I will get back to a bit later. Now, if you come back to the rear over here, you notice the pixel design that carries on from the front headlamp has made its way to the rear. It looks very smart, very funky, very futuristic, yet very retro. Does give me major DeLorean vibes with a little bit of Lancia built in there. You've got lines everywhere, even though these don't serve any purpose apart from just aesthetic. Again, clean looking design, especially in this shade of silver. It really brings out the lines further. Okay, now since we're at the back, let's talk about the rear design of the EV6. Now you get like this strange diamond-like finish for the indicators over here, which actually looks kind of cool. And the EV6, unlike the Ioniq 5, which again looks very conservative in its sense, this is a lot more flamboyant, a lot more out there, a lot more Aston Martin, Ferrari-ish in its approach. And over here again, you get a beautiful tail lamp design that wraps around all the way. And it's a bit bulbous. It does bulge out a little bit, like it's sticking out. Oh, that's the thing you have to remember. If you've got the key in your pocket, the boot will randomly end up opening, but we'll get back to the boot capacity later. So, talking about the rear again now, you've got the charging port very neatly integrated into the design over here. It just curves right in. I mean, it's neatly integrated there too, but here it may take you a while to actually find it. Again, I am not the biggest fan of the rear design. This definitely gets a lot of eyes, but for me, I don't know why, I kind of prefer the conservative styling of the Ioniq 5 a little bit more. I think it'll age better. Walk along the side and this gets 19-inch wheels over here. Again, not a huge fan of the wheel design. I mean, it is what it is. Let us know in the comment section if you guys actually like it. So one thing that I did notice at night over here is that you get a set of puddle lamps right underneath over here. Which I don't know what purpose they serve, but they do look actually a bit cool when they diffuse light right off the rear haunch over here. And believe me, this car has, it's not as muscular, but it's definitely got haunches, you know, it's got those hips. And now when you look at the design from the side, you notice this clean sort of like floating roof concept with a coupe-like roofline coming in all the way here. And again, it's very Lancia in its styling, very similar to that. In the shade of red, it actually looks quite sporty and quite Italian and exotic. Like I said, this car definitely gets a lot of eyes. But then again, both of them do, because they're nothing like nothing like any other vehicle on the road. Alright, now when you come to the front of the Kia EV6, you notice that it is not as tall, the hood, when you compare to the Ioniq 5. It is definitely a lot more low, a lot more sculpted, a lot more sportier looking than the Ioniq 5. But despite that, I think in terms of overall styling, there are certain sides and angles that I really prefer the EV6 from. but I walk around the Ioniq 5 and it's almost every side and every angle I can really appreciate it. Which is why, to me, the Ioniq 5 design comes together much better than the EV6. Don't get me wrong, I think the EV6 is a very beautiful looking car. It's a very sexy car if you ask me. And I think beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. So you as a buyer can comment down in the section below and let us know which one you think is better looking and which one you prefer. Now you get different color options with both these cars. My personal favorite on the EV6 would be this matte grey finish, and my personal favorite on the Ioniq 5 is the one that you're seeing over here, this nice brushed aluminium finish. And again, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, so let us know in the comment section below which one you think is better looking according to you. Before we continue on, let me tell you a bit more about the dimensions of both these cars. Now, in terms of length, the EV6 is slightly longer than the Ioniq 5. In terms of height, the Ioniq 5 is slightly taller than the EV6. In terms of wheelbase, the Ioniq 5 does have a larger wheelbase than the EV6. And in terms of ground clearance, on paper, it seems like the EV6 is better, but when you factor in that the Ioniq 5 is riding on 20-inch wheels while the EV6 is on 19-inch wheels, the story is very different. So these dimensions are important to consider before we step inside, because when we step inside, you will see how all of that space comes into play. EV6 has a boot capacity of about 490 liters in the trunk, and in the front you have about 20 liters of capacity, whereas in the Ioniq, you have a boot capacity of about 527 liters, whereas in the front, you've got a boot capacity of about 50 liters. Now, while the interior of the Ioniq 5 seems to be a bit more focused on sustainability and livability and practicality, this one is all out sporty driver focused. But that does not mean that it's not practical. For starters, the steering wheel is literally the same from the Ioniq 5. The only difference is they've just swapped the sides and the design of the steering wheel. But otherwise, the buttons, whatever switchgear, they all feel the same. In fact, the front two displays are also the same. While on the Ioniq, they sit a bit more flat over here. They're slightly curving a little bit, but that's about it. Even the graphics and everything you see here at the MMI is the same. Now, on the EV6, you get a few more features. On the Ioniq, you get ventilated and heated seats. Over here, you get ventilated, heated, and you also get a heated steering wheel, which is an added extra. The gear knob is no longer located at the back of the steering wheel. On the EV6, it's located right here in the front, which I think is a lot more easier and practical to use. I really like the design of the center console over here, especially the floating sort of effect they've given to it, and the implementation of this steel along with piano black and a little LED band cutting through the middle. I think it looks very sexy. Even in the front dash over here, there are these beautiful lines. You've got like a little bit like how do I put this? Like a sports car, you've got little racing lines over here on the dash, which I think looks quite sexy. Especially the implementation of the ambient lighting in here. Again, makes this interior at night look like something straight out of an Audi or a BMW, and that's quite upmarket for a Kia. You don't get a panoramic sunroof. Instead, you just get a regular sunroof, which is okay. I mean, something better than nothing. Now, the rest of the interior. Unlike the Ioniq, which gets a Bose sound system, you get a Meridian sound system over here. And let me tell you, the Meridian on the EV6 sounds better in my opinion. In fact, it is probably the best in its class, at least from what I have been able to figure out so far. The seats, now, while the Ioniq 5 focuses a lot more on comfort and easy to use seats, this again is not uncomfortable in any way. The headrest juts out a little bit, which can be a bit odd, but when you actually start using these seats, they're quite comfortable. The Ioniq is a bit more adjustable. You get under thigh support, you get calf support. Here you don't really get all of that. You can, when you're charging the car, just put it back into like a lazy boy mode and just like fall back and go to sleep, just like in the Ioniq. And it takes its own while. You can have memory seats. So just like the Ioniq, you have two memory buttons over here. Same here. The one thing that I really like on the EV6 that I did not on the Ioniq 5 is the charging sockets. Now, while on the Ioniq 5, everything is a Type A socket, which seems a bit too outdated. On the EV6, you get one Type A socket. Everything else over here is Type C. And I really like how well they've implemented the Type C sockets in the back too, but more on that later. So, all in all, I really like the interior of the EV6, and even though the Ioniq 5 seems a bit more family friendly, to me, this is sporty enough without compromising on any practicality. You got tons of storage down here, tons of storage in here. You got enough size to fit big bottles over here in the glove, in the sides. You got a roomy enough glove box, and I think someone's left some Maggie for us in here. But yeah, spacious interior. Really like the EV6. Let's step into the back. Now in the backseat of the EV6, and it is incredibly spacious over here. Despite having a slightly smaller wheelbase than the Ioniq 5, this is still surprisingly spacious. The driver is currently set to my driving position, and as you can tell, I got tons of knee room over here. Headroom seems a bit tight. I would say anyone above 6 feet or 6'1" is going to struggle, but that's thanks to the coupe-like roofline. Especially if you're sitting a bit more to the side over here. Other side, my head just cannot fit. You know, if you can tell, I have to literally bend down and go over. So yeah, sitting in the middle. Now the beauty of this interior is that you can fit one passenger in the middle quite easily because the floor is completely flat. So yeah, it's not bad actually. I mean, sure, the backrest is not the most comfortable, but that's okay. I can totally sit here for say about 50-60 kilometers. It won't be that bad depending on the road conditions, but yeah. Now in the backseat of the EV6, the windows are slightly smaller than on the Ioniq 5. You get no sunshades over here, and you generally get the feeling that you're sitting inside a car. Same with the front, same with the rear, you're sitting inside. In fact, this car has more of a sense of space from back here. You feel like the car is a lot longer. You get a nice armrest over here. You get cup holders that you can fold back, and then it's just like cubby space over here. You get a little bit of an opening over here in case you want to put, you're carrying skis with you or anything else, maybe hockey bats or whatever, you know. Anything that long that needs fitting over here, you can actually open it and access the boot, which is quite nice. Again, surprisingly comfortable car on the inside given the sporty exterior. The seats too are not bad. I really like the material over here. There's like a nice blend of fabric and leather over here, unlike the Ioniq, and I don't know what to say. I'm actually quite amazed by how comfortable and how nice the EV6 is. Though if you are someone that is on the taller side, you will struggle a little bit for headroom, but that's about it. Alright, now in the interior of the Ioniq 5, what's to like? There's actually plenty to like. The first time I sat in this car, it honestly felt like no other Hyundai I have ever seen before. In fact, it felt quite upmarket and premium compared to most cars in its segment around the 45 lakh price range. So you can imagine just what a great hit this interior is. Now, here are the problems I have with the interior. For starters, the steering wheel, it kind of cuts off a little bit of what I'm looking at the display, which I think is something Hyundai should have thought of when they designed the steering wheel. Second thing that I don't like about this car is that there's only Type A sockets. You cannot get a Type C socket anywhere in this car. Sure, you do have a wireless charging socket and you have a proper 3-pin socket in the back for your laptop charger, but same with the EV6 by the way. But no Type C, which I think is a bit of a miss. Now, things I like about the Ioniq 5. For starters, you get ventilated seats over here. They're also ventilated and heated. You can move the entire center console over here, which again can help you liberate as much room in the middle as you want. You again get a ton of storage space down here in the center. You also get a little bit here, right under the armrest, and space seems to be in abundance in the Ioniq 5 over here. There's tons of space everywhere you look. You've even got some space over here. If you want to keep bottles, you got space on the side. And overall, there's no shortage of space, not just inside, but even outside the car. Now, the display is exactly the same as the one on the EV6. Now, while the EV6 has physical buttons, this has essentially touch-sensitive buttons over here, which on the steering wheel. Both of them work exactly the same, so it's hardly a difference. But they've just swapped it, like the volume controls are here, whereas the cruise control is over here. There's no gear knob over here. The gear knob is in fact located in the back over here. You get a full-size panoramic sunroof, and I really like how the sunroof opens, not from the front but from the middle like a set of curtains, because this car is supposed to be a lot more homely. You get a nice little magnetic pad over here, like you can stick fridge magnets and whatnot, any notes, anything that you might need, and it's very thoughtful. I even like the undercast support that you can get over here. The seats over here are designed to be a lot more comfortable than on the EV6, though I would say it's down to personal preference. I find them both comfortable, but I do think the Ioniq is slightly more comfortable, especially when you factor in this little calf support that you get at the bottom over here, which makes long drives all that more comfortable. And the fact that when you're sleeping in the car, you can just lift the front up and just fall back. The seat reclines all the way flat. So I can tell you from personal experience, I spent hours in the Ioniq 5 sleeping while the car is charging, waiting it out, and just spending nights in the car. And I can tell you, it is a very comfortable place to be. So if you're going to be stuck at a charging port, you have to spend an hour or two and you want to pass out, this is actually the more comfortable car to pass out in. Wow, that's real journalism right there. The music system now. This is a Bose speaker system, but it's only Bose in terms of name. It doesn't exactly blow you away with the kind of sound quality. In fact, I would say out of all the EVs in its segment, between it, the Volvo XC40 Recharge and the EV6, this is probably my least favorite sound system. I like the ones that you get on the others far better. So, another few things now. You get buttons over here, like a set of boss buttons, where I can control the seats at the rear. I can control all seats at the rear. I can control the front seat itself if I want to move it back, if I want to move it to the front. You know, one-touch operation. And it's quite cool that you can control so much. Again, very reasonable sized glove box, and this opens like a drawer. So like I said, very homely vibe they're trying to convey over here. And there is tons of storage, and this is actually a lot more practical. But here's another downside I have with this car. If you notice closely, you see these seats are not actually white anymore. They've got little marks of brown in there, and there's little marks of brown everywhere. And this car came from Hyundai. So if the folks at Hyundai in the service center struggle to keep the seats clean, what are you as a consumer going to manage? I think that Hyundai should have thought this through and given you darker color interiors, knowing that it is very easy to get your seats dirty in this country, especially white interiors. But on the flip side, if you are all about sustainability, this is your interior, because this interior is made completely out of sustainable materials. Everything from recycled plastic bottles, fruits, vegetables, extracts from fruits, vegetables, a lot of old parts, a lot of it, the entire interior, the material, they've used corn. I mean, the list is it's just that long. And in terms of sustainability, out of all the EVs currently in India, I could say that this is one that truly comes close to being sustainable. Now, in the backseat of the Ioniq 5, again, a very comfortable place to be. The driving position is set to my driving position, so I have good enough legroom, good enough headroom. I have slightly better headroom over here than I do in the EV6. Legroom to me felt like I had slightly more in the EV6, but the beauty of the Ioniq 5 is that you can move stuff around. So if I want to choose between having more legroom, so like I can move these seats to the front, or I can move them to the back, and I have that option if I want to create more boot space, so I can move the seats all the way to the front that much. And same with my seat, I can move it to the front or I can move it to the back. And all in all, I really like the flexibility that the Ioniq 5 gives you. Here is it with the seat all the way to the front. I still have just about enough knee room over here. And this is to essentially give you more cargo space. And I like that the brand gives you the option to choose between cargo space or passenger space depending on what you're actually carrying around with you. Now, a bit of an odd thing to me, what I noticed was that while the EV6 has heated and cooled seats in the front, the Ioniq also gets heated and cooled seats in the front. But in the back, the Ioniq actually gets heated seats, which I don't know why you have that option, especially in India. But I guess if you ever decide to drive the car into cold places, northern side, maybe then you could use the rear heated seats. But yeah, this has heated seats in the back in case you needed them. Now again, the Ioniq 5 is all leather on the back. Comfortable place, you got a nice armrest, two cup holders built in over here. Again, you get nice sunshades too built into the car, which is quite nice. Much bigger window, if you can tell over here. And all in all, the interiors over here in the Ioniq 5 are a lot more minimal than compared to the EV6. The speakers have a nice little ring around them. The ambient lighting is minimal and tastefully done. And all in all, the visibility all around is much nicer. And it's a hard one to pick. I think it would come down to personal preference. So I recommend you guys to go take a test drive and sit in the back seats of these. But as for me personally, if I was going to be spending a lot more time in the back seat, I think I would take the Ioniq 5. But if I was largely going to spend time in the front seat and every now and then carry passengers in the back, then I think it's going to be the EV6 for me. Alright, now the driving experience of the Kia EV6. Now, while the speedometer might be very similar to what you find on the Ioniq, what you get in the EV6 additionally is a heads-up display, which is actually quite nice and really helps you keep your eyes on the road and doesn't let you take it off too much. So what I also like is the fact that Kia allows you to pick 3 different interior noises. So they're called stylish, dynamic and cyber. So this is what stylish sounds like. Not bad. This is what cyber sounds like. I feel like I'm in the Jetsons driving one of their spaceships, which is really cool. And dynamic sounds a bit more like a real car. I think for me personally, it's probably dynamic or cyber. They both sound really good. And I really like that Kia's giving you that option, and I wish you could also have it in the Ioniq. But you don't. You do get sounds of nature though. Anyway, now going back to the driving experience. Now, while the Ioniq is powered by a 72 kilowatt hour battery, so in the dual motor Kia EV6 that we're driving, it makes a combined output of about 321 bhp and 605 Nm of torque, which is just bonkers if you think about it, and a lot more compared to the Ioniq 5. And what do you get for those numbers? Put your foot down and oof, instantly you're floored into your seat, and it's very responsive. It's a lot more fun. The thing that gets me the most about the EV6 is the suspension setup. The suspension is set up far better than what you have on the Ioniq 5. The Ioniq 5 tends to be a lot more bouncier, which is why going fast on the Ioniq 5 does not feel a comfortable affair. You're just bouncing and wallowing the whole time. But on the EV6, it's actually tuned a bit more stiffer, so it ends up nailing quite a fine balance between ride quality and driving comfort. Plus, stack that on with a 19-inch wheel as opposed to the 20-inch wheel that you get on the Ioniq 5. Ride quality kind of balances out, and what you get is a great balance between ride quality and driving dynamics. And I quite like just the overall package in the feel. Even the steering on the EV6 feels a lot better. It's not as heavy as the Ioniq 5 and not nearly as dead as the Ioniq 5 either. In fact, it has a lot more feel to it, a lot more playfulness. Overall, this definitely feels like the more driver-oriented cabin and the driver-oriented package and suspension setup and wheel choice, and all in all, I'm just very impressed with the EV6's driving experience so far. Thumbs up from me. Alright, now driving the Ioniq 5. Now, I've spent a lot of time driving the Ioniq 5. I've done an entire road trip around India. I've done about 7,000 kilometers on the Ioniq 5. This one I've had for about a couple of days, so I've done like 100 few more. And this car, let me tell you, is a very simple, easy and relaxing car to drive. That's the first impression I got, and that is still the same impression I got after driving it all this time. It's very relaxed, you don't have to do a lot, it's very simple, slotted in to drive, there's no drama, there's no tension whatsoever. Hyundai claims that this has a range of about 630 kilometers, but in our test, we could manage to squeeze out about 530 kilometers of range. Which was mainly on the highway, and I had to keep the AC off to maximize range. But I'm sure if I was driving in the city with the AC on, I think about 500 is what I would realistically look at, which is pretty good range if you think about it. Now, this is powered by a 72.6 kilowatt hour battery, and this is powered by one motor essentially. It's got one motor in the rear, and it's a rear wheel drive. And honestly, I wish this was that cool hatchback that we've all been waiting for, that's rear wheel drive and fun to drift. But this car is not as drift friendly as you might think it is. In fact, the handling is not all sharp. It's a bit too loose in my opinion. When you go over, let's say you're doing triple digit speeds on our highways, and the car just tends to bump and wallow every time. When you go over a speed breaker, I don't know, the rebound dampening on the rear seems a bit off because the suspension always seems more eager to slam down. And it doesn't feel as plush, and I really wish that for the kind of driving experience you get with the motor, with the interior, with the entire package, the suspension does feel like it's lacking somewhere. It doesn't exactly convey that premium experience that the rest of the car does. And now that's kind of where I like what Kia has done. This is riding on 20-inch wheels with a soft suspension setup. So the suspension setup is not exactly working in its favor, and neither is the wheel size. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're moving at city speeds, it's okay. It's not that bothersome. But the moment you start moving faster and you gain more momentum, it does get a bit tedious to deal with. Especially on our journey when we were driving across the entire state of Uttar Pradesh, the long highways over there, it can get a bit too bouncy and a bit too annoying after a point. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, range, again, impressive. Comfort levels are impressive. Suspension can be a bit wallowy, but the rest is pretty good. Now, in terms of sheer performance, this makes about 215 bhp of power and 350 Nm of torque, which on paper may sound like it's actually lacking a lot, but in reality, it's more than sufficient power for you to make your way around the city and do whatever your city duties are. And you won't exactly feel like you need more out of it. It's only from an enthusiast perspective that I can tell you that, yeah, okay, you know what, I might need more. Because when it comes to sheer power and straight line performance, this is pretty much on par with, say, a 3 Series. But not so much in terms of handling. Now, the steering over here to me feels a bit heavier and also a bit lifeless in comparison to the EV6.
and that is somewhere where I think the driving experience on the EV6 is far more rewarding. This seems like a very family-friendly commuter, not so much of a happy-go, mile-munching, make you have fun around the corners kind of car. You feel the heft of the car when you're driving it, you feel the weight of it, and the fact that it's rear-wheel drive does limit the kind of terrain. Like for example, when we were driving across Odisha and we were at Puri, it did get a bit too easy to get the car stuck in sand. I managed to get the car stuck in sand over here. So I can tell you that having that all-wheel drive system backing is always a bit more handy. Even though Hyundai is setting this car up as a go anywhere, do anything, camping, take a fridge with you, do all of that. And that is impressive, provided you have the infrastructure that allows you to go there. Because it's a rear-wheel drive car, it's not exactly built to go off-road. This is not a proper SUV by any means. It's more down the lines of a crossover than an SUV, if you ask me. And for the kind of passenger this car is built and the kind of use it's supposed to be put through, I think it does a fantastic job. But if you try to get anything more than that out of it, like try to drive it like a body on frame SUV and try to go off-roading and whatnot, the experience is not really that rewarding. Other than that, again, it's a comfortable place to be. I have no complaints whatsoever, and for the price that you're paying for this car, I think this does a really fantastic job and really introduces you to the premium end of electric vehicles. With that in mind, now let's go and talk about the verdict. Oh, one more thing I'd like mentioning. Put your foot down, you get no fancy noises, you don't get any programmable noises like you do in the EV6. In fact, you just get one noise, which is, it's a very, very mild, I don't know how to describe it, it's just a very mild, typical electric car noise. Little electric car whining, and that's about it. The brakes on this car, now I kind of prefer the brake feel on the EV6 a little bit more than the Ioniq. Yeah, and that's it. It's again not a huge difference, it's a very, very minor difference. And I think that could also come down to the tires that they have. This one is using Michelin's, that one is using a set of Nexus tires. So with that in mind, let's go to the verdict.
Now, after spending enough time with both these cars and experiencing both of them, here is the conclusion I've come to. But first, let's talk about the price. So the Ioniq 5 will set you back about 46 lakh rupees ex-showroom India, whereas the EV6 will set you back about 66 lakhs ex-showroom India. Now, the EV6 at 20 lakhs more, you could practically buy another Kia Seltos. Do I feel it is 20 lakhs more worth the car? Not really, actually. You do get a lot of cool things, like you get a better sound system, you get a heads-up display, you get a swankier interior, if I may say so, perhaps even slightly swankier styling on the outside, but I don't think it is 20 lakhs worth the money. Sure, you get about 100 more bhp in terms of power, but there are faster vehicles out there, like for example, the Volvo XC40 Recharge is a lot faster than the EV6 by about a second or so, which is quite significant. And you do get a slightly bigger battery capacity on the EV6, but when you factor in how much you're going to be spending because of the dual motor and the single motor in terms of charge, they kind of balance out. So in real world tests, I would say this will give you about 500 kilometers of range, that one about the same. So it kind of makes them on par in that regard. It's just down to the performance and feel. And if you are a true driver and you prefer driving dynamics, if you like sheer acceleration, then I would say don't look at either of these cars, perhaps look at the Volvo XC40. But if you're adamant to pick one between these two, then in terms of driver experience, dynamics, and overall livability, I think the Kia EV6 is the better vehicle over here, because it finds a better balance between driving dynamics, everyday livability, and just fun in general. It's just a fun, cool car. Whereas the Ioniq 5 is a lot more family friendly, it's a lot more sedate, it's a lot more thoughtful in that way. It seems to put a lot more thought towards its interiors, though its interiors to me are a bit more tedious to maintain and keep it clean. And the exterior, especially this paint, is a bit of a scratch magnet. So all in all, I think if you have the money, you want a balanced experience, go for the Kia EV6. But if you are new to the electric vehicle game and you want the first entry point into the premium electric vehicle segment, you don't want to spend too much, you want to have all the benefits and a good introduction to the EV experience and the livability, I think you cannot go wrong with the Ioniq 5. And for 20 lakhs less, it does a lot of things. And in terms of price, I think overall, I think the Ioniq 5 is the winner to me. Though I do think that the EV6 is a really good driving package. I'm just talking in terms of an overall experience. Though if I was purely making a purchase as a driver, I think I would go for the EV6. But if I'm a family guy, it's the Ioniq 5 for me. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked more such comparisons, please stick around to our channel. We love to do a lot of EV comparisons and EV shoots. And we plan to do some more in the future, so stick around for further updates on TopGear India YouTube channel.